Hello world, I have a new haircut. I shaved my face and I look ridiculous, but that is not why we're here. I wanted to do something a little different and just kind of talk about Norse mythology and some of just different stuff I've picked up over the years. And today I wanted to talk about the twins, Frey and Freya. So, to start, a lot of our information on Old Norse mythology comes from a couple of key sources. Bits and pieces from the Icelandic sagas, and some really interesting tidbits like Brennan. Oh, what was his name? It was some kind of Christian scholar named Brennan who had some further name. At any rate, he did a neat visit to Uppsala in Sweden around like 1065 during a big conversion of the all of the different petty kings and such in Sweden. Every 9 years they'd get together for a big thing. And he writes a little bit about the Temple of Sala, of which there was a large cult of Frey. So a lot of neat information there. There's a lot more about that, but I'll get into the actual lore a bit. Other major sources are both the Prose Edda by Snorri Sturluson, who was a 13th century Viking Age poet from Iceland, 13th century Icelandic poet writing about the Viking Age, and the Poetic Edda, which is called the Codex Regius, that seems to be dated between the 8th and 10th century someplace. Snorri's Edda is sort of a retelling of that to preserve skaldic poetry more so than the lore itself. There's a lot of Christianization, right? With that out of the way, the twins, Frey and Freya. Each of them have their own pivotal stories. Frey is my favorite of the Norse gods. He is known as the god of peace and fertility. Freya is the goddess of lost sexuality, death, magic. Where Frey is the guardian of the mound, perhaps, and those who have died. Freya is the leader of the Valkyrie and has her own hall in Asgard, Folkvang. She chooses half of the dead. Frey's pivotal story was he was this bachelor, right, king of the elves. And his sister went missing, which I'll get into in a minute. He went to Odin and found Odin not there, but went on his high chair. Now Odin's wolves, Freki and Greki, let him pass. And Frey, king of the elves of Elfheim, he sat on Odin's throne to look for his missing sister Freya, and instead his eyes were taken to Jotunheim, and he found Girth. Immediately fell in love with the giantess. He wanted to go find her. He couldn't eat or sleep or work or anything, but he was a king and he couldn't leave. So he sent his shieldman, Skirnir, to go get her for him. Now, Frey had a magical weapon. We don't have a name for it, but it's basically the sword of victory. And it was prophesied that should he have that sword at Ragnarok, he would be able to fight Surtur, lord of Muspelheim, the fire giants. Now, Skirnir said, I can go, but I can't survive the journey to Jotunheim alone, so I'm going to need that sword. Now, of course, the sword represents the phallic nature of Frey as a fertility god, his power, his lust, his sexuality. But he gives up the sword, and Skirnir goes to Jotunheim, basically threatens Girth a lot until she agrees to come back with him. And I always kind of pictured her being super bitter about it until she actually sees Freyr and goes, you're the god of male sexuality and fertility. Hi. So Frey ends up fighting a giant, Girth's brother, and kills him while he was collecting a stag for a feast for the wedding, and ends up ripping the stag's antler off and killing the giant with it. And thus, after he carries the antler as his weapon and is renowned for it, thus one of his runes, two associated, one being Ing, thus his name Ing Freyr, Ingvi Freya. Frey means lord, so Ing is really more like his first name, and Freya means lady. But I'm getting off topic. The other rune being Fehu, or prosperity, which looks like right, F, like the stag's horn. Frey loses his weapon, and when Ragnarok comes and so comes to Muspelheim, Frey dies, but he fights next to Skirnir and Freya. He can't just take the sword back as a bonded magical thing. He gave it up. He can't undo that. But it's interesting because I've always taken it as to be that he had something to die for. He lived a very lonely life, and then he had something to live and fight for. Freya, she was married to Od and had children in this, married life, but never felt, even though she was the most beautiful and the most desired of all the goddesses, did not feel like she had truly come into her own. And so she learned about 3 dwarves who could make the most wondrous of artifacts, and she went to them, and the dwarves said, listen, we can make you this artifact you want that will bring you into your full power and might, but you basically gotta let us gangbang you, each of us a night. Pretty questionable whether it was more rapey or more, just lustful. But regardless, Freya is in this way not a goddess of love, but she's a goddess of sexuality and women's sexuality, and a lot of stuff that's really repressed in modern culture. She's a sacred whore. She's like, yeah, let's do it. Let's bang. I'm super down. And so she does, and has a great time doing it, for as far as we can tell. And at the end, they forge her Brittingamen, the necklace that makes her really come into her own. She becomes the most beautiful. And to me, although, the necklace itself is powerful, I feel like it really just helps her come into her own. Now, Od is lost, and Freya does go looking for him. He disappears after that incident happens. But Freya, unlike Frey, are inverted, and Freya gives up that life in order to come into her true self. And I think it's very fascinating. They're very opposite stories. Usually that would be the man who would do that, the woman who would get married, and if we were looking at it in modern culture. So I really enjoy that. Now Freya takes up many runes, ones that were secret and known only to her. Even Odin didn't have them. And she's known for the power of Seidr, which is the woman's magic of foretelling the future. As well as choosing the dead and being the leader of the Valkyrie. Even Odin was scared of Freya. The two of them I'm very close to. I find their stories very much resonate with me. And they're not Aesir directly, they're Vanir. After the civil war, the war between the Aesir and the Vanir, hostages were exchanged, and Nord, the god of the sea, and his children Freyr and Freya went to the Aesir and became part of them. But the Aesir being these sort of metaphysical gods of very human things, laws, decisions, kind of things that really only relate to the human world, or the Jotuns, who are totally primal, like the volcano cares not for the life of man. The Vanir are like primal things that really relate to humanity. Reproduction, lust, fertility, desire, growth. And that's my take today on Freyr and Freya. I'll probably have a lot more to say over the coming years. Take from it what you will. One day I'll make a website and a blog, but I hope you enjoy my YouTube rants. Thank you. See you later.